You are now listening to Hervien's podcast. Thanks for tuning in. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Hervien's podcast. In this episode, I sit down with Ramona, Hong Kong's first female ex-UFC fighter who is redefining what's possible in the Octagon. Born to Filipino-Chinese parents, Ramona's journey to international MMA sensation is a masterclass in overcoming self-doubt and finding your own true calling. I'm sure you'll love it. So without further ado, let's step in and listen to our guest right away. Hi, Ramona. Super excited to have you today as our guest. So back when I was in Hong Kong, I always heard your name and stories around in different martial arts gyms. And so I'm very excited to finally have you and, sitting with you through the screen and chat through with you. Ramona, can you let our listeners know who you are and where are you now in your career?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me on. And right now I am based in Vegas. I grew up in Hong Kong, and so that's where my career started. I grew up playing a lot of different sports. I grew up playing basketball and rugby, and so I played rugby for the Hong Kong team for a short time. And then I focused on kickboxing at the time, and then it kind of turned into Muay Thai. And I got into it because it was just a fun thing to do to keep in shape, because I wanted to be able to have my fitness for the sports that I was playing in school. And then I just, fell in love with it. And then after a certain period of time, it made sense for me to pursue it full time. And so I started the first part of my career in Hong Kong for a few years. And then I traveled around Asia to Korea, to Thailand, to China, and then now I'm here in the US.
That's very impressive. And I understand back in the days before you transitioned into a full-time professional fighter, you're from a corporate background. Can you let us know what made you make that decision to transition and to make such a big move?
Sure. It wasn't a difficult decision. I spent most of my working years actually working in gym management. And so I did that for almost 4 years. And then when I transitioned into a more corporate role, I just thought that that's what I was supposed to do. I didn't really do it for any other reason. It wasn't because I wanted to, wasn't because it was something that I was even remotely passionate about. I thought that, everyone goes into finance, consulting, real estate. I should probably do that too. And so I did that for, I don't even think it was a year, but it became clear to me that I didn't want to be working in a cubicle of an office, staring out the same window every day for the next 10 years, which is what it would take for me to be successful in that field. And I also didn't think that I even wanted that, what am I putting all this effort into this for? And it was clear in my work ethic too. Like it wasn't until I got into fighting that I was like, I work really hard and I'm very dedicated and I'm very focused. But before that, when I was working in the corporate environment, I didn't have those qualities because I just wasn't remotely interested in what I was doing. I didn't find any value. Not that I didn't find any value. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how, small businesses work. I learned a lot about how to look at numbers, how to look at a spreadsheet, for example. But it just wasn't what I really felt passionate about, which is kind of cliche to be like, oh, you should do find what you're passionate. I was already training for a long time in MMA, or not MMA, but in martial arts.
Yeah.
So then I knew that I had tendencies that made me good at it, that made me pick it up quickly. And so it wasn't always a passion. Obviously, it was really difficult at the beginning, but then I was able to endure all the difficult days and learning process, which then, made it into a passion. And of course, I'm very fortunate to have been able to pursue that, but it wasn't a difficult decision at all. I think it just became this voice inside my head that was saying, look, you have to do it. You're getting into your late 20s. It's either now or never. At least do it for 1 year, 2 years. What are you going to lose? You can always come back to this job. So that's kind of the negotiation that I made with myself. And I think it was going against the expectations of everyone else, which was probably the hardest part. But I just knew that I didn't like where I was, and so I had to make a change.
It's very impressive you had that courage, and definitely feel all the struggles you had in the past and how it was like when you were not doing what you were passionate about, and you find a decision to make a move. It's like, I really need to do it. Like, it's now or never. And it's like, not too late.
Yeah, it's the feeling. I'll describe it as a pain. Now that I've been, I'm a business owner now, and I deal with people who are trying to reach their health goals and their fitness goals. And a lot of times we talk about this prospect has to be in enough pain to make a change, because change is
Yes.
hard. No one really wants change, even though we might dream of bigger things that require change. We don't actually like the process of changing. We don't like to be out of our comfort zone. And so for me, I was afraid of change, but the pain of staying the same was greater than the fear of change. And so I think, if you think about it that way with a lot of things in life, I think that's kind of what can really initiate, taking that big step.
Yes, definitely. At some points, like, we really have to encourage ourselves to make that decision when we no longer want to have the pain to be on the same page anymore. So I'm very impressed you make that decision, and congratulations for creating such a wonderful career that you are passionate about now. And I've been looking through your journey, and I'm really impressed by that. And you mentioned that you are a fitness entrepreneur and you have your own business. And I'm definitely keen to learn more about that, and at a later stage when in our chat. Going back to your former UFC fights, Ramona, I'm very keen to learn more. How was it like back then when you were preparing for a big fight like that, when you're facing like such elite talents in matching with your opponents? Can you let us know how was your mental state like back in the days when you're preparing such fights, like at different points, maybe like a few weeks out before the fight, all the way preparing to the fight week, and all those final hours before walking out to the cage? How was it like?
Yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster. It's exciting. You get your opponent, maybe like anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks. Sometimes it's shorter, but generally 8 to 10 weeks away from the event. And then you sign the contract. And so that's when the excitement kicks in. And then it makes you able to push harder in training, right, than you would normally. And then you get excited, obviously, in the beginning, and you push really hard. And then you'll always get to a point in your fight camp where you're going to kind of run out of gas because you're not recovered enough. And so everyone that I know always encounters that stage of resistance to where they let excitement carry them through the first part, and then they're really pushing themselves really hard. And you get to a point where you're like, oh, I need to recover now. But the fight is like closer. And so you end up having that self-doubt of like, well, if I miss practices, then I'm going to lose the fight. I'm not putting in as much work. So it takes a lot of maturity to be able to listen to your body and hold back a little bit at certain points, knowing when to rest, when to pull back. So say maybe take a week off, not a week off, but a deload week where intensity is just lower. And then you can kind of come back and push. But I would say all throughout the whole thing, you're working so hard that it becomes quite difficult. You're tired all the time. You're dieting. You might not make decisions, as you normally would. Your thoughts, feelings, emotions are not as they normally would be. And that's less to do with the fact that you're fighting soon, more to do with the actual process of the fight camp itself, right? Of like not eating enough, training really hard twice a day. And so when your body is in that state of stress, it can't really make decisions in the most logical way. So then that self-doubt creeps in too a little bit, right? Because like you feel like your body's not at 100%. And then, the whole idea is you're supposed to have some recovery time towards a fight, which sometimes happens, usually doesn't. And I think, 3 weeks out, it kind of feels like very real, like this is happening. You start getting ready, mentally ready. And this is a real roller coaster. Some days you're like full of self-doubt because you had one really bad practice, or like it's a one really bad week where you're feeling run down and you think, oh my God, I'm gonna lose this fight. This is a terrible idea. And then you come back the day after, the week after, and then you have some really good rounds or really good days, and you're like, oh, I think I can do this. This is fine. And so it's all part of the journey, and it's not for everyone. Practicing martial arts and becoming a really good martial artist is so different to becoming a fighter and competing and having a date set and having to lose that weight. And then the week before, you're kind of just like the 2 weeks out, last week of hard training, you're just ready to get it over with, because then you have the weight cut you have to look forward to. And then your dieting gets like even more intense. And then fight week then becomes just trying to do less and depleting yourself even more, because you're going to have to cut anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds at that point by, cutting out certain foods, by stopping food intake after a certain point, by stopping liquids at a certain point. And then the weight cut is what they call the fight before the fight, where it's, for many people, it's harder than the fight itself, because you're having to sit in a hot sauna or a hot bath, and you're already tired. You haven't had food. You haven't had anything to drink, and you're trying to sweat it all out. So the body is very, it's struggling at that point, right? It doesn't want that, but the mind takes over and you kind of push through it. It's a very trying to think of the word, out of body experience. Like it's very difficult to explain to somebody. It's almost like somebody who's had a near death experience, right? Like you can't really explain what that feels like, to feel your body almost like shutting down, to know that your body's telling you that it wants to stop, but then you kind of have to keep going and keep pushing it in the safest way possible with people around you, and people that have experience in that. We're always checking heart rate, like all these vitals to make sure that everyone's okay, because there are a lot of horror stories, people passing out, people like dying, even things like that. And so having to be really careful about that, but also knowing that you have to do it like to the pound, to the half a pound. And so that for me is like the hardest part of the whole process, that weight cut. And I mean, for some other people too. And so you're only focused on that. You're not even thinking about the fight anymore. You're like tired, hungry, thirsty, but like you're not even thinking about the fight because you got to get that done. And so that's kind of stressful. And then, weigh-ins happen, make weight, you miss weight, at least you're, then you get to refuel for anywhere from 24 to 36 hours. Yeah. And then from then on, you're just thinking about the fight. Like, I just have to recover as well as I can. I have to sleep well, I have to eat well, I have to replenish my fluids to then get in there. And then you just try to relax that day to try to recover. And then you try to get as much sleep as you can that night. And then the next day you do a shakeout, which is basically a quick, really easy, simple workout with your coach just to get a sweat going. And that kind of helps build confidence. And then you just relax until the fight, basically. And then you get to the venue a few hours before. The nerves kind of start to kick in, that day. And, that whatever happens is going to happen. And it's going to be over before you even know it, And so you try to the mindset is try not to make this moment bigger than the rest of your life or the entirety of your life. But oftentimes we fall into that trap of thinking that this is it. It's either this or nothing, because it's all we can see and it's all we've been focusing on. So there's nothing really outside of it that's even remotely important. Not like your health, not your like financial future, not anything. You're just focused on that fight of like wanting to win. And then, you're just trying to put yourself in a good mindset. Some people like to get really angry. Some people like to just relax, try to conserve energy, try to have mindful practices, trying to be present in the room, try not to get caught up in your thoughts. And then you start, getting your gloves taped up. And that's when it kind of hits. And it's like, this is happening. It's happening real soon. And you start warming up, and usually you feel good because coach is working with you and you're going over game plan things. And so this is just final moments now. And then, I think that kind of walkout is probably like the most nerve-wracking thing. A lot of people that I talk to, it's like they just want to teleport into the cage and like start fighting, right? But the whole build up of like, they come in, they're like 5 minutes, 5 minutes to get ready. And then you start walking out, and then people know that you're walking out to fight, right? Even the people who like work there. So they're like, let's go, clapping, and like, you got this. So there's a real thing of like, someone's walking out, they're walking out to war, and everyone there knows that, so it's a very intimate kind of moment of like, this is it, your final steps. And so whatever thoughts you have in your mind, it has to be conducive to making you just like feel your absolute best when you get in there. And then the coach will be like encouraging you, saying things, repeating things. Like, you've done this before, you know what to do. We've been training for X amount of time. And then the walkout song, your song comes on, and then that walkout is just like, you're just like in the moment, basically. Like it's a big room, depending on where you are, right? People around, maybe no people around, but cameras are on, and then you just walking in the cage, and that moment is just the nerves are super high, because you're like, it's almost like you're standing on the edge of that cliff, and you're gonna jump, but you haven't jumped yet. You're just waiting there to jump. And then, maybe your opponent's already there, or maybe they're coming out. And then when that happens, they're there announcing you and all that, whatever. And then they get you together and they're like, fight. And then once they say fight and you're in front of that person, then it becomes more familiar. It almost becomes more comfortable. Like all the other stuff was like super uncomfortable, walking out and like the announcements and all these things. And once they say go, it's just one person in front of you, and that's it. This person that you've prepared for, like what's the worst they can do, right? They're the same size as you. They're not some like 200-pound dude. You've been training for this, you're considered equal as far as like abilities. And then it just becomes like kind of automatic from there. Of course, like more nerves, you get more tired easily, but that's kind of familiar once the cage door closes and the time goes in, because I've been in those situations tons of times in the gym, right? Obviously different circumstance, but I've had someone in front of me trying to hurt me, and then I have to defend myself and attack.
Yeah. Even like hearing you through the screen, I can feel the intensity, like when you're walking through so much preparation back then towards the last moment when you fight. And I can definitely feel how you're feeling back then. Do you have any strategies how you calm yourself down? Like you mentioned there were moments that you was really nervous, or like when you face your opponent, it becomes more comfortable. But back, even like before walking to the stage up to that moment, do you have anything that you help yourself to like really cut the noise outside? I have to calm myself down.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's more of realizing that it's there. I think for me, it's making me realize how small this moment is. This moment is only big for me and maybe some people on my team for that day, right? But nobody is really going to be going home thinking about what happened more than I will. In a card of 10 fights, there are 20 fighters. I'm one of 20 fighters. I'm one of 20 people who are feeling this way, whose entire careers are dependent on this moment. And of this card, how many MMA cards are there all over the world this weekend? Probably several. How many people don't even care about MMA? How many people are living their lives right now out there, right, that aren't even aware that there's a fight going on, So it's like, this is just one step out of many, and I just need to trust as well. So there's that, with that side of like not making this like the biggest event in the entire universe in the history of the world, right? And the other one is just knowing and trusting that I have done all the work. Like all the good days, all the bad days, I showed up every day. I got my ass kicked. I was sometimes a nail. I was sometimes a hammer. I did that. I put in the work. I did the dieting. Like I went through all those days of struggle, of putting myself in those situations, but I'm making this choice. I chose this. I get the opportunity to do this. And this is a privilege that a lot of people don't get. And so I get to decide what I want to do with this, right? And it's like fear and excitement come from the same place in our nervous system. So I can choose to be fearful, or I can choose to convert that to excitement, because there's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be excited about, of like all the things that I visualized that I would do, all the things that I've been working on, all the things that I really want to try when I get there, Of course, there are certain things that you visualize that don't happen the way that you hoped, unfortunately, but there's so many factors that are outside of your control. But what is in my control is how I handle myself, the decisions that I make, hopefully. And all I can do is my best in that moment.
Mm.
And oftentimes, sometimes that's not enough. And I can like beat myself about it after. But, you know, it's going in there, it's just you. And you have to come to terms with everything that you do in there and know that you've done everything that you could.
Yeah, that's very well said. You mentioned some of the things I actually want to touch upon. It's like visualizations of like your game strategies, part of your plan when you come to fight preparation. Do you like visualize a specific scenario, like fight scenario, or is it more like it depends on how you feel on that day?
Yeah, so we always have a game plan based on what the opponent has done. So we look at game tape, and then,
Right.
I probably look like once, and then my coaches spend more time watching, looking for opportunities. But really, if one person might fight a certain way, and then they might fight a totally different way, right? Some people, depending on the level, there's not a lot of tape on them, so you kind of have to go off of like one fight or maybe two, and they might be short. So it's more of like, what are my strengths and how can I use my strengths to my advantage?
Really?
And then we just keep drilling that. And so we'll have specific moves that we specifically want to train extra, because we want to be able to, we think that there's a high probability that that would happen. And so there is a rough game plan of like, are we going to keep it standing? Are we going to take it to the ground? Where do we want to be? But other than that, sometimes it's just a fight is a fight, right? Like standing on the ground. If I'm going against somebody who is really good on the ground, then it would make sense for me to want to be standing because I'm a stand-up fighter.
Mm.
So that would be the smart move to make, right, in the moment. But yeah, you kind of just never know, things that happen. You kind of just go with it.
Right. So after a big UFC fight, like whether it's winning or losing, how long does it take for you, like for your mind to truly reset and then start thinking about your next challenge and then start preparing for a next fight? Can you let us know how is your process like?
Years. So with wins, honestly, it's like, I think I haven't, and this is just me, I don't feel like I've really had any really meaningful wins because, when I fought in the UFC, I didn't win any of my 3 fights. And I think if that had happened there, that would have been a really meaningful one. All the other wins that I've had have been earlier in my career, and they've been kind of quick wins and maybe matchups that weren't super challenging. So I honestly can't even, like, I remember my wins, but none really jump out at me as being like meaningful, unfortunately. And I think that's just a me thing. I don't think that I know that there are other people they can remember and look back on more meaningful things as far as winning. But the losses have all been meaningful in a sense of, I think about them all the time. Like I still think about them. Like fights that I lost like years ago in the beginning of my career, like 8 years ago, I can still think about them. I don't think about them as much as like the ones most recently, but it's like the losses that I had in UFC, like I still think about those. Well, I would say I probably think about like one of them, but the circumstances for like losing, there are many different reasons, not just related to the fight itself. So there are a lot of times I lost the fight before the fight even began. So I lost the fight when I was preparing in fight camp. I lost the fight when I was cutting weight or when I was planning the weight cut. That didn't go well. That wasn't planned well. Like I didn't do the right decisions. Like I, chose one modality to cut weight over another that would have been better or more successful. But all these things are like, could have, would have, should have, right? Looking back at like the mistakes that I made and would change for the future. But every fight is like that. Every fight camp, like there's always something that you realize, oh, that didn't go very well. I should probably do that differently next time. So yeah, I would say the losses are hard. it's always something that, of course, afterwards you like analyze and you overthink and you watch the fight and you're like, oh, the fight is like different from my memory. But you're always going to be hard on yourself, right? No matter what, because everyone wants to, we don't fight to just, fight. Like we want to win. So when we don't win and we put everything we had into it, it's difficult because how many people in life put 100% of themselves into something meaningful in front of people in a public setting and they fail? Not a lot, because it sucks. It's scary. No one really wants to do that, right? Failing in private is way easier than failing publicly where
Sure.
everyone's watching. So I think that's the one thing that fighters get to experience that a lot of people don't. It's such a low, like it can tear you apart. Like it can make you depressed. It can make you change the way you see yourself and totally crumble your confidence in the way that you perceive yourself. But in that process, you also have to build yourself back up, right? Anything broken gets rebuilt stronger than it was before. So there's a real opportunity of mental strength that comes from losing. And also, obviously, you remember your losses because you remember the mistakes that you made. And you hopefully, will not make that same mistake. And so the learning curve is very steep to where if you got your back taken, you got choked out, you're probably going to be working on back defense for like months or even years, right, to prevent that from happening. So I think there's a really powerful effect that losing has on you, but it still sucks.
I know how much you've been going through, and I really admire like you going through fights and going through all that. Like just listening to that, I really admire it. And in the age of social media, there's so much noise and after fights. Like people also doing predictions, like, or when an opponent can trash talk each other, or people doing analysis of the fight. How do you filter that kind of information? Like what you let it in and what you block out, and also that touch upon losing as well. Like how do you make sure you stay confident throughout? And you also mentioned earlier, you talk about definitely one needs very good mental strength to go through all of this. But how do you ensure you stay confident throughout your whole career as a professional fighter?
That is a really good question because it doesn't get talked about enough that with social media, the noise around sporting events and athletes is louder than ever. The accessibility to communicate with people in a positive way, but also in a negative way. So I know a lot of people that have to block it out. They'll limit phone time, which is always a good idea. Because if there's like someone saying something about you, making a comment on a post, like she's going to get knocked out or, she's going to lose, or like it could be good things like, you're going to win this for sure, whatever. You just don't want any of those things to get in your head, positive or negative. You just want to have your own opinions about it and your team's opinions about it. So as much as possible, at least for me, I try not to like get in the middle of that or like watch things like that or look at posts, things like that. I know there's some like crazy people that like that probably, that enjoy looking at things like that and like commenting and things. And I think that's great. I think there are a lot of characters that are so confident in themselves that they're able to do the whole trash talking, and not even in an aggressive way, but in like a funny way, maybe, And I can think of like a couple people in my mind of like, they kind of trash talk on their social medias, but it's funny, right?
Yeah.
But you have to have a lot of confidence to be able to do that and like, just treat it like a game. Because for a lot of people, fighting is like so serious and so intense, they can't come around and doing that. So I do kind of love that. But I think that there's a lot more attention around athletes and around the sport now. And like I said, the accessibility, anyone can message me about my fight, tell me I did a good job or tell me I did a terrible job, that they lost money on me, that, I've gotten a lot of rude messages from people that I don't even know about like, calling me names, saying really mean things. And it's like, it sucks, right? It also lets you know that like people who make these negative comments and go out of their way they're generally unhappy people that have never achieved anything in their lives. And so they feel like it's okay to like throw out hate and like judge people, because they've never even taken an opportunity to challenge themselves, which is fine, but it's kind of makes you lose a little bit of hope about humanity, right? You're like, these kinds of people get this kind of power. So then that's also another thing, like you don't want to give them the power by like engaging with them and telling them, no, you're wrong, because you're trying to reason with an unreasonable person. Like, what is it worth to you? If they're not going to change their mind anyway, it's going to make you feel better by saying something. I used to do this. I used to like respond back, and I realized that there's no point. Like these people do these things because they're so unhappy with themselves. It's like trying to tell them that the sky is green or like blue, or it's blue, but telling them the sky is blue, but they think that it's green, right? It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of have to just let it slide, because you're like, well, the less power I can give it, the less it'll affect me, right? And then they can, because they probably get a kick out of getting a response. But I think that that's the negative side of it. But on the positive side, I think it's great that there's more accessibility, that there's more people talking about fighters, putting them on shows, podcasts, getting them more reach. And so fighters now have more opportunities than before, because, the marketing potential is huge on social media, right? If you can market yourself, you can show your personality, show how genuine you can be, like your authenticity. People like that. People like to be able to connect with fighters. Like watching fighters fight is not really as impressive as knowing who those fighters are, and knowing that they're a father, or knowing that they're a mother, or knowing that they have a job, right? And that you train with them, and that they're a teammate, and they're a good human being. Like that makes you invested then in the fight of like, oh, I really hope that this works out for him or her. So humanizing fighters has been a really big thing that social media has done, which I think is great, and also giving fighters a platform, an opportunity to grow their brand and also move up in the sport.
Have you ever had moments of self-doubts? And obviously you have mentioned so much, like people messaging you, like in the past, like even mentioned something not nice. And when there are moments of self-doubts, how do you deal with it in your life?
Have I had moments of self-doubt? Yes, every day. Every single day. To different extents. Obviously, if it's something externally related over like, say, a comment or something, which I haven't experienced in a while because I've not been in the UFC for a long time, which has kind of been, stress relief too. Not being in the public eye, it's great. With those, it's difficult. Like obviously you kind of have to like go with it and just know that it's not you. It's really like a them thing, and you're just another cog, right, of like the whole hundreds of fighters that they're making bets on, and they lose and they get angry because they shouldn't really be betting their rent money on fights anyway. But I think in this other chapter that I'm in right now, I'm a business owner, I deal with clients, I deal with prospects, I am handling my own marketing, my own sales, my own client relations, counting, my finances. So it's a lot of different hats, right? And there are a lot of things that I'm good at, and there's some things that I'm not good at. Everything is new. It's like I changed my whole content strategy in the last year. I went from just being a fighter to now being like fitness, information. And that was, even though people might think like, oh, that makes sense, you're an athlete, you go into fitness. But that identity shift was difficult, very difficult, to where I'm like, I don't know if people are going to respect me. I don't think they're going to know. They're going to take my advice or believe or give me credibility, was my issue of like, I'm just a fighter. I don't have degrees in like exercise science, or I don't have a nutrition degree. Like, why would they believe what comes out of my mouth? So there was a lot of self-doubt with my ability to be credible as a person providing fitness information. But also, I've been passionate about fitness, nutrition, and exercise for so long, because obviously with fighting, there was like a big weight loss aspect. There's a big performance aspect. How do you eat to feel good, not just to lose weight? There's a big, obviously with like hydration, mindset. There was, and then I became passionate about it because I just wanted to be really good at it. So then I've always been very clued into what all the experts are saying in this field, right? And like that's where my free time goes, is I'm literally watching videos on like nutrition, on exercise, on certain exercises, how to grow certain parts of the body, energy balance, weight loss. difference between fat loss and weight loss, muscle gain, all these different things, the metabolism. That's stuff that I'm really passionate about because I feel like people get stuck on it, and I was stuck on it. But I experienced a lot of self-doubt there. Also, like creating videos. Like I didn't create a single video like my entire, career, right? It's just photos. And then people like fighting photos. So it's easy to get engagement. Now I have to like actually put thought into it. I have to write a script. I have to write my thoughts down. I have to put them in a way that's concise enough to fit into a minute and a half or a minute, because I don't have to be too long. And then I have to make sure that it gets to the point. I have to make sure it's entertaining. I have to make sure it's understandable. I have to film it. I have to take loads of takes filming it, trying to say it in the right way, edit it, add music, add B-roll, add photos, choose a thumbnail, write a post. So much goes into it, right? And I didn't even know how to do this a year ago. Like I would have been like, F that. I'm not doing this. No way. Too much work. But I did. And so I think putting yourself in those situations, and I've always done this, I've never been prepared for anything that I've ever tried to do and accomplish in my life. I've literally just said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I've had to figure it out. And I think that a lot of people think that you have to be ready. You don't have to be ready. You just have to decide that you're going to do it, and you will become ready. So the same thing, like I did that TED Talk. I wasn't ready to do a TED Talk, but I said yes to it. And then guess what? I became ready. And I was like, oh my God, I did that with fighting. I wasn't ready to fight, but then I trained at it. And then eventually I got ready to be a fighter and to fight. The same thing with this business, I had to be ready, just put myself out there, sit with all that self-doubt, right? But then what I did was I took actions to silence that doubt. So every single action I took, every single video I posted, every single piece of information I shared, I am silencing and decreasing the amount of self-doubt that I have, right? And so you have to, this whole idea of you have to outwork your self-doubt. It's in your control. And so you have to just take steps forward, one step at a time, not look at this whole thing that you have to do and be like, oh my God, I have to release 50 videos this year. It's like one thing at a time. Why don't you write the script? All right, script written, why don't I film the thing, and then editing, learn how to edit, all these things, new things, right? How to talk to prospects, how to sell people on the idea of health and fitness, right? That was a whole nother thing too. I just had to, put myself in those situations. And also I had a lot of help. Everything I do, right? In fitness or in fighting, I have a coach. When I did that TED Talk, I had a coach helping me with that. I just do it. Someone was telling me, this is how you should do it. Give me feedback. With my business, I have a coach that tells me what promotions to run, how to say this, how to keep track of this, what systems. And so I asked for help. And that's another thing that has helped with overcoming my self-doubt is I will find people that have done what I've done millions of times or help people do what I've done millions of times. And I'll seek out their help because they will guide me in the direction of making less mistakes and making the process as straightforward as possible.
Yes. I really love what you said. You mentioned so many useful strategies to how you will deal with self-doubt, like taking action. Once you take action, you really start doing it. You take practice, and eventually you get better and more confident with it. And then, seeking help, people are afraid of seeking help, unless we really ask for someone more experienced, you never know, and, they can tell you, what are the mistakes to avoid, and they can save your energy, and you can focus on more important things or the better steps you take. I really love
100%. It's redirecting your energy in the right places because anyone can put effort into it. But if you're putting effort in the wrong place, you're wasting your time.
Definitely agree with you. And imagine now you're doing your online coaching and you have a coach as well, someone guiding you through that. Can you share with us what project are you working on now and what will be your goal for the next year as we're approaching the year end?
That was a great question. So I'm in right now my first year of business and it's doing really well, better than expected. So I had a goal that I set at the beginning of the year of revenue numbers I wanted to hit. And I'm basically going to hit probably 50% over that. So I'm going to be hitting just under 150% of my targeted annual revenue, which is huge because I was just a fighter struggling financially with no money, I thought I was going to have to work at a Starbucks or something. Like I like go back to school. Like, what do I do? Like I haven't even worked in an office for like years, right? And so working for myself made sense. I'm passionate about fitness. So I was really, really lucky that this opportunity presented itself to me through another teammate, a teammate of mine who's also doing the same thing. And so I hired these coaches, business coaches, that coach people how to build and scale a successful online coaching business. And they have provided me with more value than I can even describe, because obviously I had to make an investment, right? Both of my time and energy, but also monetarily. But what I made back from that investment has been like crazy. The business is still something that I'm still growing and still trying to figure out, like I remember this time last year I had 2 clients. Now I have like 30. And so I want to build that and keep building that into next year. And so that is really the main primary thing right now for me, is continue to learn more about business, continue to create content, to find my voice, to create valuable content, to put out information that I would have found useful when I was younger and trying to navigate my health and my fitness. And on top of that, I also really want to start a YouTube channel. And I've been talking about this for so long already. I've been talking about so long, it's become ridiculous that I haven't even started, because all of the content that I put out in my Instagram, they can all be created longer form for YouTube. And I really want to do it. It's more of a time thing. I have to block out a good amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing that I do want to get going before the year is done. It's going to start. And so it'll just be, longer form content, more about fitness, health, mindset, about how to reach certain goals, and like just explaining how, things like fat loss works, how things like muscle growth works in a way that people can understand. That's going to help them conceptualize the goal and help them achieve those goals more easily and more quickly. And then I think eventually, not maybe next year, I would like to launch a podcast too. And that could be kind of in and around the same, like that and the YouTube channel. But I really love being able to share ideas, generate ideas, have conversations of value that people can learn from, that people can, and it could be things that they've heard before, but if I can repackage it in a way that is compelling, that offers a different perspective, maybe tying it to an analogy they might find more relatable,
Yes.
that will drive home the actual point. Because sometimes you can communicate one thing, right? We can both speak English, but then what I say is not interpreted by you the same way as I intended it. So I find communication to be such an amazing part of, human existence, really. And if I can communicate all the things that I know, or all the things that I want to know, in a way that other people can relate to, then that's kind of the goal, I think, for me in like the next, 5 years.
That all sounds very exciting. And congratulations again on your business. And even you start just a year, congratulations that you have good results and ongoing. I hope you have more clients. And if our listeners want to approach to you for any coaching or any advice, how can they reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so I am most active on Instagram. So I respond to all of my messages. Anyone that DMs me, I read them and I respond if it's appropriate to. For coaching, I work with, busy, burnt out millennials. So I do like working with people over 30, because over 30 is when we start having all these responsibilities and people feel like fitness and health is not within reach. So I help busy, burnt out millennials drop 15 pounds without doing intense restrictive fad diets or long workouts. So I make the process really simple, and I make it attainable for even the person with the busiest schedule. I have clients who have 3 kids and full-time jobs, and they can still do the program. So I just want to make fitness and health accessible to people who might think that they're too old and don't have time, and show them that you can do it the right way. You don't have to work harder. You just have to work smart.
Yeah, definitely agree. Working smarter is the right way to go. And thank you so much, Ramona. Thank you for sharing so much with us. Also with your UFC journey in the past, as well as what you're working on, other exciting projects. And I wish you best of luck and your ongoing business. And also let us know when you have the YouTube channel and also the podcast. We'll definitely be supporting.
Will do. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ramona. Wow, so that's it. Great chat with Ramona, and I'm sure you all learned something from her. I want to say a big thank you for all your support and listening to the end of this episode. Be sure to hit the follow button and also give us a positive rating. Also, don't forget to share this episode with your family and friends. Until then, see you next time. Take care.